My brother-in-law turned 18, and like any guy his age, he had certain needs. He'd never had a girlfriend before, and we all know what that age can lead to, especially when you're in a house with no one else around. One day, I walked past his room and saw the door slightly ajar. What I found inside shocked me, but instead of getting angry, I chose to do something no one would have expected. Let's start from the beginning. My name is Emily, and I've been married to Jake for 5 years. We have a house we both love, a quiet life, but things have started to feel stagnant. Jake works long hours, and while I appreciate his dedication, his absence has made the space feel cold and empty. We don't fight, but there's a growing distance between us. Jake's younger brother, Alex, is 18. He's been living with us since his parents divorced, and while I've always tried to make him feel comfortable, I've noticed some strange changes in his behavior. Alex is quiet, introverted, and spent a lot of time in his room, but lately, something about him seemed different. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't rebellious. But there was a strange, uneasy feeling whenever I walked past his door. He'd lock it sometimes, and other times, I'd hear sounds that didn't quite fit with what he usually did. The quiet shuffling, the soft noises, things that I couldn't quite place. One afternoon, I was passing down the hallway when I noticed the door to Alex's room was slightly open. I stopped in my tracks, listening for a moment. I didn't know why, but something about the silence felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I should check on him, even though I didn't want to invade his privacy. But curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to peek inside. What I saw startled me. Alex was sitting on his bed, his face flushed, his phone in his hand. He wasn't looking at me, but I could see the flickering light from the phone illuminating his face. It was clear that he was watching something, but it wasn't the kind of thing I'd expect him to watch. His eyes darted around nervously, and I could see his hand fidgeting in his lap. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew it wasn't something he'd want me to see. I stayed still, not making a sound, but my mind raced with possibilities. I thought back to the times I had heard strange noises coming from his room, the way he'd lock the door at odd hours, the strange looks he would give when he thought no one was around. Was this it? Was he struggling with something that he hadn't been able to talk about? I wasn't sure how long I stood there, but eventually, Alex shifted his position. His phone screen was facing me for a brief moment, and I saw it clearly. It was on content not suitable for someone his age. One that I hadn't expected him to be exploring. My heart sank in my chest. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was something more. I could feel the weight of the situation. Alex, at 18, was entering adulthood, and I realized how little he had been prepared for the complex emotions and desires that came with it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't disgusted. But I could tell that Alex wasn't handling it the way most people would. He was hiding it, trying to cover his tracks, but I had seen enough to understand. I quietly pulled away from the door and decided to give him some space. But the unease didn't leave. Instead, it grew. I couldn't ignore what I had seen. I couldn't pretend that nothing was happening. There was something more to this, and I knew I needed to figure out how to handle it. Later that evening, after dinner, I was walking past Alex's room again when I noticed something odd. The door was closed, but I could hear movement inside. The sound of something being crumpled, followed by the unmistakable rustle of paper. Was he cleaning up? I could feel the heat rise in my chest, the anxiety settling in. Why was he being so secretive? Why was he acting like this? I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was going on, so I knocked lightly on the door. Alex? I called, trying to sound casual. Everything okay in there? There was a brief silence before he replied, his voice slightly shaky. Yeah, just cleaning up. I'll be out in a bit. I nodded, but the tension in my body didn't go away. It was clear now that Alex was hiding something he wasn't ready to talk about. I tried to shake it off, but my mind couldn't stop racing. I had an idea. I didn't want to invade his privacy, but I needed to understand what was really going on. I had an old rule for myself: always trust your instincts. And something was telling me that there was more to this than Alex was willing to admit. Later that night, when Alex was in the shower, I made my move. I entered his room quietly and, just for a moment, glanced at his phone, still on the desk. I told myself it was only to check if he was being honest. But when I unlocked the phone, I was surprised to find that it wasn't share history and was immediately faced with the sites he had been visiting. I was shocked, but not outraged. This was natural questions about relationships and growing up. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Alex wasn't dealing with his emotions in the best way. He had been hiding it, keeping it all to himself, and I could tell he was struggling. But how could I help him without embarrassing him or making things worse? I knew this was a delicate situation, but I also knew that I couldn't leave it like this. It wasn't about what he had done. It was about how I could guide him through it. How I could help him make sense of these overwhelming feelings without shame. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of what I had discovered. I didn't want to overreact, but I knew that I had to address it. I kept thinking about how Alex had looked when he realized I knew what he had been doing. The Alex's hesitation to talk about the shame, it was clear that he didn't know how to handle what was going on in his head. I decided to give him some space, to let him calm down, but I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable conversation. I wanted him to feel safe, to know that he could trust me, but I also needed him to understand the importance of handling his emotions in a healthy way. He was growing up, and it was time for him to learn how to deal with his desires and curiosity without guilt or shame. That evening, after dinner, I went to his room. I knocked lightly on the door, and after a moment, Alex called out from the other side. Yeah. I took a deep breath. This was it. Alex, can we talk for a minute? I said, my voice calm but firm. There was a pause before he opened the door. His face was a little flushed, and he avoided making eye contact with me. I could tell he was nervous, unsure of what was going to happen next. Come in, he said quietly. I stepped inside and sat down on the edge of his bed, trying to make the atmosphere less tense. Look, I want you to know something. What I saw yesterday, it's okay. You're 18. I get it. Curiosity is normal. Alex hesitated for a moment before sitting next to me. I didn't mean for you to see that, he muttered, his voice small. I know you didn't, I reassured him, trying to keep the conversation grounded. But what I do want you to understand is that there are healthy ways to deal with your feelings. It's okay to be curious, but it's important to be careful with what you're looking at and how you process those feelings. What you do with them matters. Alex nodded slowly, but I could see he was still struggling to come to terms with everything. I didn't know who to talk to about it, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt like I was doing something wrong, and I didn't know how to stop. I could feel the weight of his words. It wasn't just about curiosity. It was about his sense of guilt, his fear of judgment. Alex, no one is perfect. But that's why we have to learn from these things, not hide them away, I said softly. You're going through a lot of emotions right now, and you're going to make mistakes. We all do. But what matters is how you handle it when you realize you've made one. Alex looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something different in his eyes, relief, mixed with a little hope. You're not mad, he asked, his voice uncertain. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm not mad. I'm just trying to help you understand. This is a learning process, and I want you to feel like you can talk to me about anything. There was a long silence before Alex spoke again. I guess I've been keeping everything inside for a while. I didn't want anyone to know. I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to keep it all inside. It's okay to share. That's why I'm here. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and we both turned to see Jake standing in the doorway. He looked confused, his brow furrowed. What's going on in here? I stood up and walked toward him, trying to maintain a sense of calm. It's fine, Jake. We were just talking. Jake looked between me and Alex, his expression growing more puzzled. Talking? About what? Alex shifted uncomfortably, looking at the floor. It's nothing, really, he muttered, clearly embarrassed. I turned to Jake, giving him a reassuring look. We just had a conversation about Alex's feelings. It's nothing bad, I promise. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't push the issue. He looked at me for a moment longer, then sighed. All right, just make sure everything's okay. I nodded, and Jake left the room, closing the door behind him. The weight of the moment hung in the air between Alex and me. There was a tension, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was more like an understanding. We had talked about things, and now we both knew that there was no shame in feeling confused or needing help. The conversati the days that followed felt different. Alex was quieter, but there was a newfound sense of peace about him. He was still figuring things out, but I could tell he was making an effort to understand his emotions better. He even started joining me and Jake for dinner more often, something he hadn't done in a long time. I kept the conversation going, encouraging him to talk more openly about his experiences. It wasn't about fixing everything right away. It was about giving him the tools to manage his emotions and helping him feel less alone. And for the first time in a while, our home felt like it had a little more warmth. The distance between Alex and me had closed, and while there were still moments of awkwardness, I knew we were moving in the right direction. Jake never found out the full extent of our conversation, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever tell him. But I knew that Alex had learned something valuable in the process. He had learned that it was okay to be confused, to make mistakes, and to ask for help. That was all I could ask for.